Welcome to Andy Order Vault. Today I have with me here this FiiO Q11, a DAC amp. And if you happen to be in Kuala Lumpur and you want to get this locally instead of online, head over to Red Ape Audio. They have a few of these in stock right now. I got it from them. All right, so let's just have a look first at the content and the build itself. As you can see here, this is the box itself. Okay, very simple. And inside, these are the things that you're going to get. The DAC amp itself, Q11. And let's just quickly have a look at the build and the feature here. As you can see, this is a battery powered DAC, and this is the volume knob, which is also the on and off button. And let me show you this. Switching on and the light turns on. So it is self-powered. And in fact, in front here, very simple interface. One single-ended port and one 4.4 mm balance port and high and low gain switch. All right, so very simple. And inside here, you're gonna get three different type of cable, which is very good. Okay, see here, this is the long cable, which is meant to be used when attaching to PC or laptop, and a short USB-C cable here. So let me just explain a bit with this three short cable. And of course, Q11 also include, for those using iPhone, Lightning USB-C cable, which is very good. Okay, so first, with this cable itself, this cable, despite being longer as well, it is also capable of charging. So when you attach this to Q11 and attach it to any host, it will draw power on top of the data stream for the audio, and it will charge the Q11. However, when attaching to a phone, right, attaching it like this to your phone, this cable here will not charge. So a matter of saying is that if you want to drain the battery of your Q11 without continuously charging it, please make sure to use this here, the short one. And when attaching to PC, this will always charge Q11. And perhaps in a scenario you don't want to charge, you can always use this same cable here, attached to your PC, and it will not charge. So that is a good thing sometimes when you want to kind of like, regulate the battery usage, which will prolong the battery life. Okay, same thing with this cable here. Okay, let's just have a look at the rest of the accessory. This is very interesting actually. You see, let me just show you something here. Okay, bear with me. So you see all this padding here, and the fact that this is kind of like, stackable DAC. The best part is that you can actually do this here like this. Put the padding here and use this restraint here, rubber restraint, like that. And then stretch it all the way over. And then attach the cable here. Interesting, right? It is very solid. Now, practically, you can carry this Q11 anywhere. Most importantly as well, you need to download this particular app, which is called FiiO Control. I have already connected this Q11 to my device here, which is my phone. So that's why you can see the screen right now. So what I'm going to do is just simply click on this Q11 and click OK. All right. So what will happen is that now you'll be presented with some of the final feature which will allow you to fine-tune the unit even further. The most important part of this app is actually this one, the one that interests me the most, which is low pass filter. So if I were to click on this, okay, as you can see there, there's 5 selectable filter. And I'll just be very frank with you, I haven't had the time to test all of them extensively, but the default one will always come at this minimum phase fast roll-off filter. I kind of like, prefer to use, in fact, non-oversampling filter here. What it means is that I am telling the DAC not to alter anything, not to oversample anything. So, as you can see on screen right now, this Q11 is in fact Cirrus Logic CS43198, single DAC only. Okay, and the rating for each channel is in fact at 650 milliwatt per channel at 32 ohm. Quite powerful, I would say. And from the single-ended, it is rated pretty decent at 165 milliwatt per channel at 32 ohm as well. Okay, let's just touch a bit on the battery here. As you can see, Q11 is in fact equipped with 2006 mAh lithium battery, and FiiO claimed that it can run up to 13 hours. So the best part is that, in fact, I can attest this Q11 was able to run more than that. In fact, at the mark of 15 hours, I was like wondering, when are you going to die? When attached to my phone, I was like, really impressed. So good thing there. Okay, so looking at the rest of the configuration, the signal to noise ratio is as much as, or should I say, at around 125 dB, which is quite good. Anything above 120 is definitely very good. So a manner of saying is that this Q11 will be very silent even when attached to highly sensitive IEM, and I can confirm that as well. So now let's talk about some other feature which I think very interesting as well. I got this from a FiiO website. So let me show you this. As you can see there, it is so flat. It is the kind of flatness that would make flat earther very proud. What it means is that simply this Q11 is very neutral and does not add any kind of coloration to the sound itself. There's no boosting whatsoever throughout any of the sound frequency, which is again a huge plus. Okay, now for the sound impression of this Q11, I will be using this headphone of mine, which is Sennheiser HD650 300 ohm. Not exactly an easy headphone to drive. Spec-wise, 1-to-1, this Megatron is pretty much similar to Q11 in many ways. Okay, first, the output power itself. Megatron is rated at 4.7 VRMS. Okay, and each channel will carry at around 630 milliwatt of power. So let's just quickly test Megatron first. Okay, and I'll make sure that Megatron is selected here. Okay, and I will use this song here, which is from Madonna, a song which I am so very familiar with. And typically for Megatron, with this Sennheiser HD650, I will be setting up the volume at around, let me see, in fact, 6. Yep, 6 out of 100. That is how powerful Megatron is, driving Sennheiser HD650. Now, we will stop this and then just simply switch over to Q11. Alright, so now it is attached to Q11 on the 4.4 mm balance port. And in order to test this Q11 power-wise as compared to Megatron, which does not have a volume controller, I will in fact, as you can see here, set the gain at high and the volume knob all the way to max, so that I would be able to control Q11 100% from my PC here. So, okay, let's just put it to 0 first because I don't want to blow my ears. Okay. Now, let's just play the same song. Okay. Now, let's adjust the volume. Okay, we already... Alright, there you go. So, in order for Q11 to achieve similar level of loudness to Megatron, in fact, I have to crank the volume all the way to 14 out of 100. Let's talk about the sound itself. First, the dynamic. What I'm hearing right now is that a presentation of sound which is engaging, dynamic, and in fact, kind of like really fun. The sound itself is rich. The extension of the dynamic itself, it seems to be quite well extended. It does not sound weak at all, definitely. And the way the dynamic flow, it is fluid, it is smooth, very good coherence between different layer of dynamic itself. Okay, let's just quickly switch to another song, which I am very familiar as well. And for that, I will just choose Diana Krall, a song which I have been listening to like millions of times. Okay, so I would need a bit more volume with this. Okay, even 20 out of 100. Okay, first, the upper frequency. Okay, the reason that I love this music is that because there's a lot of detail in the upper frequency. Smaller detail, subtle nuances. Okay, first, I am hearing proper micro detail with regard to treble. Ting! Okay, that bell. Okay, and then some, good presentation of the decay itself, which is very smooth, flowing into the topmost of the upper frequency. And now the mid range itself, it's kind of a bit, frontal, rich. The texture is good. The vocal itself, Diana Krall is contralto, so her vocal is naturally, chesty and deep. And I can feel that there's a good immersion of the sound of the presentation here, which means that I can feel her singing, the sort of emotion that she tries to impart through the song. So many of things that it's kind of a bit warm, but it is still natural and neutral enough and organic. And the instrument, like, the tuck, 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 the percussion, even the string, it's kind of like, the attack itself is very polished. Let's check out the lower frequency. In order to do that, I'm just gonna have to play with something a bit more energetic. So we were just gonna switch to massive attack with Angel. Wow. Just listen to that, First thing that came to my ears, the seismic sensation of the lower frequency. I mean, the sub bass is like, gung, 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 gung. It extends really well. And the punch, the rumble, the authority of mid bass, it is very solid, in fact, rich, does not sound lean at all. It is also kind of like, fast paced, quick. There's no hint of being bloated. There's no hint of being, let's say, woolly or anything like that. Okay, now let's talk about the technical aspect of this Q11 when driving something difficult like this HD 650. Let me just put it straightforward here. The sound stage itself. Okay, it's kind of a bit, in your face kind of presentation. The headroom itself, the head stage, it is not as wide as how I prefer it. And I know for a fact that this HD 650, when connected to something like this, Class A tube amp, which is at around 1003 milliwatt of power, will offer a bit more of headroom with the soundstage. It felt a bit more spacious, where else this is kind of a bit, close in. Not exactly narrow, but I know HD 650 can do better with the soundstage itself. But at least one thing that I like, the positioning, spatial positioning, it's very well presented, 2D sort of presentation. Not exactly 3D. The placement of the instrument is clean, okay? The layering itself is clean. Each instrument easy to track separately. The speed, the resolution, the imaging, it is definitely good. And in fact, other than the soundstage, I am not hearing any kind of cons, which I like to highlight. Impressive. Okay, now let's talk about comparison with Megatron, especially something which I am very familiar with. You see, I mentioned just now that I am hearing that Q11 struggle a bit with soundstage, okay? And I must admit that the first difference which I am hearing from Megatron to Q11 is that the soundstage is not as wide enough, okay? I am not saying that Megatron have super wide kind of soundstage, but definitely it felt a bit more spacious, and definitely the wider sounding is from this X2O MT602, especially when combined with this Megatron. Okay, that is pretty much the only con. And also, direct comparison between Megatron to Q11 with the songs that I am familiar with, I would also say that, the upper frequency presentation of Q11, despite being very well resolved, it is kind of like not as sparkly or energetic as how I heard it when I attached this same headphone to Megatron. A manner of saying is that Megatron is in fact a bit more energetic and brighter on the upper frequency itself. Okay, despite the slightly reserved presentation of the upper frequency, it is kind of like, still maintaining proper amount of macro and micro detail to the presentation itself. It is not just, splash in your face kind of thing. And then tone and timbre balance. I must say that both Megatron and Q11 can be considered as fairly organic. However, the main difference is that, Megatron is kind of a bit more analog sounding, whereas Q11 is a bit more just neutral and organic. But at least I am happy to say that this Q11 does not exhibit any kind of digital element to the sound itself, which is again another huge plus in my book. That was fun, right? I always find it a lot easier to talk about sound when I listen to it on the fly to describe the sound itself. And I hope that has been kind of like, useful to you as well. Now let's talk a bit more on the sound aspect of this Q11. As I have shown you just now, it is definitely one of the dongle, or should I say DAC, that I consider as being neutral, uncolored, and it does not add any kind of flavoring to the sound itself, which is a good thing. And in fact, this actually relates a lot to synergy factor, because being neutral, uncolored, and transparent, Q11 would be able to synergize with many different type of partner. However, there are several caveats which need to be actually taken into consideration as well. So as I mentioned earlier, perhaps with the sort of tuning coming from Sennheiser, which is the HD series especially, and in fact with some IEM like this C Audio Bravery AE, which has similar sort of warmish tuning to Sennheiser, the sound can be lacking a bit with the presentation of the upper frequency coming from this Q11. But perhaps that is the only con that I would like to highlight, because when using this Q11 with the rest of my listening equipment, especially this like Kinera Idun Golden, which is practically uncolored, super neutral as well, and of course Tanjim Zero, Tangzu Heyday, and my number one here, which is Big Quest Printer. All those IEM, which I have shown you just now, can be considered as slightly on the brighter side as compared to the sort of sound that I am getting from Sennheiser HD650, which also means that, right, something which is like, again, biodynamic DT series, especially DT990, would sound perfect to synergize with this Q11. Okay, so that's pretty much on the sound aspect of it. So let's just wrap things up. There are many things that I would consider as, a very positive trait of this Q11. First, the price itself. Price at just $90 give and take. This thing is definitely very difficult not to like. Okay, the cons being very minimal. It has a lot of power. It offers a lot of value. In fact, with the feature which matters the most, you can easily put it in your pocket, in your bag, attach it on your desk, plug it in, shoot, and then enjoy your music. So definitely something which is very easy to like. Okay. I hope this has been informational to you, and please stay tuned to Andy Order Walk for more contents like this. Thanks.